I bought a small cottage by the coast so I could finally have some quiet in my later years, a place where the sound of waves replaced traffic and nobody needed anything from me anymore. Or so I thought. The phone rang while I was standing on a step stool in the upstairs bedroom trying to rehang a crooked curtain rod. My hands were dusty with plaster and my knees ached from being bent too long. I had turned 67 just 2 weeks earlier. I'd celebrated with a slice of supermarket cake and a mug of peppermint tea. No cards, no calls. "Mom?" Lena's voice was brisk, already in a hurry. It always sounded like that when she wanted something. "I need the house for a few days." I climbed down carefully and leaned against the wall, steadying myself. Outside the window, the Atlantic lay flat and gray beneath heavy clouds. Seagulls circled low, crying like they were warning someone. This house, the little blue cottage on the edge of Harbor Ridge, Rhode Island, had once been part of an old dockyard. I'd bought it with my entire pension from 38 years of teaching and every dollar I'd saved by never taking vacations or buying nice clothes. The walls were thick stone, always cool and damp. The pipes complained when the temperature dropped. But it was mine. "What do you mean you need the house?" I asked. "For the launch event, my new marketing firm. I told you about it." She didn't pause for my answer. "We're hosting clients and potential investors on Saturday. Your place is perfect. That coastal vibe looks authentic and charming. People will love it." I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar pressure in my chest that came whenever Lena talked about plans that included me without actually including me. "Lena, I live here. It's not a venue." "I know," she said sharply. "That's why I'm calling ahead. You can stay in the workshop for a few days, the back unit. You put a heater in there last year, right?" The workshop. The small storage space behind the house where I kept tools and old boxes. I'd added a cot and heater once when my neighbor's nephew needed a place to crash for one night. It wasn't meant for living. "That's not—" "Lena, please," she said, shifting into that reasonable tone she used when she wanted compliance. "This is huge for my career. It's only a weekend. You can come back after." I looked around the room. I'd spent weeks stripping wallpaper, repainting, hunting down secondhand lamps and shelves. 8 months earlier, I'd sold my apartment in Brookdale, the one that still smelled like the life I'd lost when my husband left me for his dental assistant. That apartment felt like a museum of disappointment. This house was supposed to be my fresh start. "What if I say no?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "Then we need to talk about whether you should really be living alone out here. I mean, what if something happens? Assisted living might be safer. And honestly, if you embarrass me in front of my clients, that conversation will happen a lot sooner." The threat hung there, neat and polished. "I'll stay in the workshop," I said. "Thank you," she replied instantly, cheerful again. "Just stay out of sight during the event, okay? This is professional. I don't want you wandering around in gardening clothes." She hung up. I stared at the wall I had painted myself, listening to the ocean outside, and realized that even here, in the house I owned outright, I was still being told where I belonged. And it wasn't inside. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The wind picked up after midnight, tapping against the windows and slipping through the cracks like restless fingers. I lay awake listening to the rhythm of the sea change. I'd grown up along this coast, and I knew the ocean had moods. Tonight, it sounded unsettled. I finally gave up and went to the kitchen, wrapped in my robe, and made a cup of tea. The dark water outside the window looked thick and heavy, swallowing what little moonlight broke through the clouds. The cottage creaked as if it were stretching its old bones. My father had worked on boats. My mother had run the household with strict budgets and sharper discipline. From her, I learned how to stretch every dollar, how to plan, how to survive. I worked my way through college, became a teacher, married a man who seemed steady. We had Lena when I was 25. Then, years later, he left, took half our savings and most of his apologies with him. Lena blamed me for being too controlling. She stopped calling for months. When we reconnected, it was never the same. Our conversations became transactions: help with tuition, help with rent, help with moving, and now help with a business launch. By morning, my decision was already forming. I walked down to the marina just after sunrise. The docks were slick with dew, and a few fishermen were already unloading crates. I stopped near the end of the pier where I could see the open water beyond the breakwater. "Storm's brewing," someone said. I turned to see Mr. Collins, who kept a small trawler tied near the outer slips. He lived here longer than I had and knew the tides better than the weather apps. "When?" I asked. "Saturday afternoon, most likely. Wind from the southeast, heavy rain, and the moon's nearly full. That means the tide'll ride high." "How high?" He shrugged. "High enough that I'd move anything valuable off the ground floor if I were you." My stomach tightened. My house sat lower than most on the street. On bad days, seawater sometimes crept up to the front steps. During one storm in October, it had leaked under the door and left a thin, muddy line across the stone tiles. Saturday, the same day as Lena's party. I thanked him and walked back slowly, the idea settling into place like a stone in my pocket. For the next 2 days, I moved through the house quietly, packing and lifting and storing. I wrapped my paintings in old bed sheets and carried them upstairs. I put important documents, insurance, the deed, old family photographs, into waterproof containers and stored them in the attic. I locked the upstairs rooms and kept the keys with me. Everything that mattered went up high. Lena arrived Friday afternoon with a rented van and 2 assistants who walked through my home like stage managers surveying a set. "The caterers will be here early. You need to be gone by noon tomorrow. And remember, stay in the workshop." They pushed my furniture aside, covered the floors with plastic, and strung decorative lights across the ceiling. By evening, my living room looked like a showroom. Beautiful, empty. Before bed, I checked my phone again. Severe storm warning. Coastal flooding expected. Peak tide at 2:38 p.m. Right in the middle of her event. I packed a small bag. Clothes, phone charger, thermos of coffee. I left a short note on the counter. "Gone for a walk, back later." Then I waited for morning. Saturday morning, I left before anyone arrived. The sky was already the color of wet cement, and the air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I walked 3 blocks to the Harborview Cafe, the little place with wide windows facing the water and the best coffee in town. I ordered a mug and chose a table by the window where I could see my street in the distance. From there, my cottage looked peaceful, almost innocent. The cafe slowly filled with locals who knew what bad weather meant. People ordered coffee to go, checked their phones, talked about batteries and sandbags. The owner, Marla, refilled my cup without asking. "You waiting out the storm?" she asked. "I suppose I am." She glanced toward the harbor and frowned. "They're saying the tide could be the worst we've had in years. You might want to head home soon, make sure things are secure." "I already did," I said, and meant it in more ways than one. By early afternoon, the sky darkened until it felt like evening had arrived early. Wind rattled the street signs, napkins and leaves skittered along the pavement. At 1 o'clock, the rain started all at once, heavy and loud, slamming against the windows like handfuls of gravel. The wind pushed it sideways, and people ran past the cafe with umbrellas bending inside out. Through the blur of rain, I could still see my house. Cars began pulling up. Guests in coats and dress shoes hurried toward the front door, laughing, trying to protect their hair and makeup. From this distance, they looked like little dark shapes moving toward a bright, welcoming glow. Inside, the lights were warm, golden, inviting. I imagined Lena greeting people with that polished smile, introducing herself as the founder and director, talking about growth strategies and brand identity. She had always been good at sounding confident, even when she was scared. Thunder rolled across the water, low and heavy. Marla came to stand beside me at the window. "This is going to be ugly," she muttered. I checked the time on my phone. 2:15 p.m. The harbor water was already rising fast, climbing over the docks and sloshing against the pilings. Boats strained at their ropes, rocking like nervous animals. At 2:30, I saw the first dark water spill into the street in front of my house. Not rainwater, ocean water, thick and fast-moving, carrying bits of seaweed and debris. It spread quickly, swallowing the curb, then climbing the tires of parked cars. Inside, the party continued. Shadows moved behind the windows, people talking, laughing, unaware, or maybe assuming that walls would keep them safe. At 2:37, the sea surged. A wave rolled in from the harbor and slammed into the front of the house. For a moment, the structure held. Then the front door burst open. Water poured inside like it had been waiting. Marla gasped behind me. Someone shouted to call emergency services. I couldn't hear anything from this distance, but I saw chaos unfold behind the windows. People running, shapes stumbling, lights flickering wildly. Then guests began forcing their way back out, wading into water that reached their knees, some falling, others helping strangers back to their feet. And then I saw Lena. Her pale dress clung to her body, soaked and streaked with mud. Her hair, usually sleek and perfect, hung in wet strands around her face. Even from here, I could tell she was shouting, waving her arms, trying to direct people while everything unraveled around her. Emergency sirens cut through the storm. Fire trucks and police cars arrived with their lights flashing red and blue through the rain. First responders guided people toward higher ground, wrapping blankets around shaking shoulders. The house went dark. The party was over. I wrapped my hands around my cold coffee and waited for the tide to turn. The rain slowed sometime after 3, and the worst of the wind moved up the coast. The tide began to retreat, dragging broken things back toward the harbor. Chairs, decorations, pieces of someone's expensive celebration floated in muddy circles before settling in the street. I finished my coffee, pulled on my raincoat, and stood. Marla touched my arm. "You shouldn't go out there yet." "It's already easing," I said, "and I know the back way." She studied my face, searching for something. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" "I knew it was possible," I said gently. "That's all anyone ever really knows." Outside, the air smelled like salt and wet wood. I avoided the main road and took the higher alley that ran behind the old warehouses. When I reached my street, the damage was clear. The front of my house looked battered. The door hung crooked on its hinges. One window was cracked, and dark water still streamed out across the stones like the house was bleeding. The street was littered with the remains of the party. Broken glass, soaked tablecloths, bent metal frames from rental chairs. A soggy banner with my daughter's company logo lay plastered to the curb. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was Lena. She saw me immediately. "Where were you?" she screamed, sloshing toward me through ankle-deep water. "Why didn't you warn me?" I stopped at the edge of the street. "You told me to stay away." Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks. Her voice shook with fury and disbelief. You knew there was a storm. You let me bring people here." "You told me not to interfere," I said quietly. "You told me to hide." "You did this on purpose," she cried. "You wanted to ruin this for me." Behind her, emergency workers were helping the last guests away, some wrapped in blankets, others arguing into their phones. Someone was taking notes for insurance claims. "This is my house," Lena snapped. "After this, I'm making sure you can't live here alone anymore. You're clearly not capable of making good decisions." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to the upstairs rooms. "My name is on the deed. I paid for this house. What happened was a storm, not sabotage." "You're unbelievable," she said, shaking. "You've always resented me." The words didn't land the way they used to. "Go home, Lena. Take care of your guests. I'll handle my house." "You can't just kick me out." "You already kicked me out. You just didn't expect consequences." I turned and walked toward the back entrance, the one that led to the dry upper floors. I didn't look back when she called my name. Inside, the upstairs was untouched, quiet, safe. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt my hands start to shake, the adrenaline finally fading. 3 days later, the cleanup began. I hired the restoration crew myself, paid the deposits, signed the paperwork. They tore out ruined drywall and set up loud drying machines. I returned the catering invoice unopened with a note, "Contact event organizer." Lena called 17 times. I didn't answer once. On the 4th day, I was planting bulbs in the garden when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I kept working. "Mom, we need to talk," Lena said behind me. I pressed another tulip bulb into the soil and covered it gently. "Do we?" She apologized, said she was stressed, said the storm had ruined everything, and she hadn't meant what she said. I finally looked up. "What do you want, Lena?" She hesitated, and that told me everything. Lena shifted her weight on the gravel path, her shoes spotless compared to the mud on my hands. She looked polished, like she always did when she needed to be convincing. "I want us to move past this," she said. "I talked to my therapist. She says I have unresolved anger about Dad leaving, and I may have taken it out on you." "I may have," I repeated. She winced. "Okay, I did, but I'm trying to fix things." I brushed dirt from my knees and stood. "Why now?" "Because we're family," she said quickly. "Because I don't want to lose you." I picked up my trowel and walked toward the shed. She followed. "You didn't want to lose me when you needed my house," I said, "or when you needed tuition money, or when you needed a place to stay." "That's not fair." "Fair left this conversation a long time ago." She sighed in frustration. "So what? You're cutting me out of your life?" "I'm changing how you're in it." I began hanging my tools on their hooks one by one, the way I always did. The order of small things calmed me. "I'm not available for threats, ultimatums, or being treated like I'm disposable. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be respectful, and not just when it's convenient." She crossed her arms. "So what does that mean exactly?" "It means no more using me, no more calling only when you want something, no more talking to me like I'm an embarrassment." She stared at the floor. "I didn't realize how bad it was." "I think you did," I said softly. "You just didn't think I'd ever say no." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I almost reached out. Almost. "I don't know how to do this differently," she whispered. "Then you need to learn," I said, "without me doing the work for you." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she nodded once. "I'll try." "That's not enough," I replied. "Trying is what you say when you want credit without change." Her jaw tightened. "You're being cruel." "I'm being honest." She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away without chasing her, without calling after her, without fixing things the way I always had. The quiet that followed felt strange and peaceful. 2 days later, Mr. Collins came by with a paper bag of fresh fish. "Figured you could use something nice after all that mess," he said. We talked for a bit, and then he cleared his throat. "My granddaughter is coming to stay with me. She's having a hard time, dropped out of school, doesn't know what she wants. Think you might need some help around here? Give her something to do?" I thought about the garden beds that still needed work, the fence leaning at the back of the property, the shed that could use organizing. "Bring her by." Her name was Tessa. She arrived the next morning in torn jeans and boots too big for her feet. She barely looked up when I showed her around. We started with weeding. She didn't talk much at first, but she worked hard. When she messed up, she fixed it without complaint. By lunchtime, her shoulders had relaxed. "It's nice here," she said quietly. "Yes," I agreed, "it is." And for the first time in a long while, I felt like my house wasn't just healing from water damage, it was filling with something new. Tessa began coming every morning around 8. She showed up in the same worn boots and a different oversized sweatshirt each day, her hair usually pulled into a messy knot that slipped loose by mid-morning. We worked until lunch, then I made soup or sandwiches and we ate at the kitchen table without much conversation. It was comfortable. In the afternoons, she took on bigger jobs, fixing the loose boards on the fence, clearing out the cluttered shed, carrying away debris left from the storm. When she didn't know how to do something, she asked. When she made mistakes, she corrected them. That alone told me a lot about her. One afternoon, while we were repainting the front hallway, she finally spoke up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret standing up to your daughter?" I dipped my brush into the paint, thinking. I regret that it had to come to that. I regret that our relationship became something so unbalanced. But setting boundaries? No, I don't regret that. She nodded slowly. "My mom keeps telling me I'm throwing my life away, that I'm selfish for leaving school." "Do you feel selfish?" I asked. She shrugged. "I feel tired and stuck. I hated my classes, hated sitting in lecture halls pretending I cared." "So you left?" "I failed out, technically." I smiled a little. "Details." She laughed once, then went quiet again. "What if I end up with nothing?" I put down my brush and faced her. "Then you start again. Most people do, several times." She absorbed that quietly. As the weeks passed, the house felt less lonely. The stray orange cat that had been hanging around finally decided to move in. Tessa named him Copper. He followed us everywhere, supervising our work from sunny patches of floor. One evening, as we were packing up tools, Tessa showed me a notebook she'd been filling with sketches, boats, docks, window frames, pieces of furniture. "You're good," I said. She shrugged, but she smiled. "I like drawing things that actually exist." "Have you thought about carpentry or design?" "My ex said that once. My parents wanted engineering, something stable." "Stability is important," I said, "but so is not being miserable." She grew quiet after that, thoughtful. A few days later, Lena texted, "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone face down and went back to sanding the window trim. I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on small victories: fresh paint drying smoothly, fence posts standing straight again, garden beds prepared for winter. And Tessa began to look lighter, more certain. One night, headlights swept across the kitchen window. Tessa froze. "Is that your daughter?" "Yes." "Do you want me to leave?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "No, you can stay." But in the end, she slipped out the back door anyway, giving me a quick, supportive smile before she went. Lena looked tired when I opened the door, not angry this time, just worn. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She glanced around the repaired hallway. "It looks different. Good, but different." "It is." She sat on the edge of the sofa like she wasn't sure she belonged there. "I'm trying, Mom, but I don't know how to fix this." I folded my hands in my lap. "Then you start by listening." Lena took a shaky breath and looked around the living room as if gathering courage from the walls. "I know I've been selfish," she said. "I know I treated you like you'd always be there to catch me." I didn't respond. I waited. She fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "When Dad left, I didn't know who to be mad at. He was gone, and you were still there, so I blamed you. And then it just became normal." "That explains it," I said softly. "It doesn't excuse it." She nodded. "I know." Silence settled between us, thick but not hostile. "I don't want to lose you," she said again, "but I don't know how to be the daughter you want." "I don't need perfection," I replied. "I need respect and effort and honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." She looked up. "What does that look like to you?" "It looks like calling when you don't need something, visiting because you want to see me, not because you want to use my house. It looks like not threatening me when I don't immediately agree with you." Her face flushed with shame. "I didn't realize how cruel that sounded until afterward," she whispered. "I did," I said, "when you said it." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." I studied her face, searching for defensiveness, for excuses. I saw none, just fear. "I believe you're sorry, but consistent behavior does." "So what now?" "Now you go home," I said gently. "You think about whether you're willing to have a relationship with me that isn't centered on what I can provide for you." She looked wounded. "You're asking me to prove myself." "I'm asking you to show me who you really are when you're not asking for something." She stood slowly. "That feels like punishment." "It's protection," I replied. She nodded once, not trusting her voice, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I agreed. I had to. After she left, the house felt quiet but not empty, different from before. Tessa texted later that night. "You okay?" I replied, "Yes, thank you for checking." She sent back a smiley face and a photo of Copper sleeping on her jacket at her grandfather's house. The next morning, Mr. Collins invited me out on his boat. "He needs someone to help clean fish," he said, "and you look like you could use some sea air." I hadn't been on a fishing boat in decades, but I went. The water was calm, pale blue under the early sun. As the boat cut through the swells, I felt something in my chest loosen. "I think I'm finally learning to stop fixing other people," I said. He nodded. "Took me 70 years. When I got home, Tessa was waiting with 2 coffees and a paper bag of pastries. "Peace offering," she said. We ate on the porch, watching gulls dive along the shore. I told my mom what I want to do, carpentry or furniture making, something real. How did she take it? "Not great," she admitted, "but I feel better." I smiled. "That matters." She hesitated. "Do you think people can really change?" "I think they can, but only if they want to, and only if they stop blaming others for who they've become." She nodded thoughtfully. The ocean rolled in quietly behind us, steady and patient. We were in the middle of fixing the back fence when a car pulled into my driveway, a silver sedan, clean and unfamiliar. Tessa wiped sweat from her forehead. "You expecting someone?" "No." A woman stepped out, holding a notebook and a phone. She looked professional in that polished local news sort of way. "Mrs. Hartley?" she asked. "I'm Nina Brooks from the Harbor Ridge Chronicle. I'm covering storm recovery along the coast. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about the flooding at your home." My stomach tightened. "I'm not interested," I said. She smiled politely. "It wouldn't take long. Just how the damage happened, how you're rebuilding. People like to hear stories of resilience." "I'm not a story," I replied. She hesitated. "Your daughter already spoke with me." Tessa stiffened beside me. "What did she say?" I asked. "That there was a misunderstanding about the storm warning, that guests were endangered because precautions weren't taken." I felt heat rush to my face. "Then you already have your angle." "I'd like to hear your side." "My side is private," I said. "The only thing you can report is that my home was damaged in a storm and is being repaired. That's it." She looked frustrated. "The party is the interesting part." "The party is not your business," I said firmly, "and it's not my story to tell." Nina closed her notebook slowly. "So you're protecting your daughter." "I'm protecting myself," I said, "and I won't turn my family into entertainment." After she left, Tessa let out a breath. "Wow, I didn't expect that," I admitted. "You could have made your daughter look terrible," she said. "I don't need revenge," I replied. "I need peace." That evening we cooked together, simple food, lemon chicken and rice. Copper sat in the doorway hoping for scraps. "Can I ask you something?" Tessa said while stirring the pan. "Of course." "How did you know when to stop trying to fix things with your daughter?" I considered the question. "When I realized I was always tired after talking to her, not tired like I needed sleep, tired like I'd been carrying something heavy for years." She nodded slowly. "That's how I feel after talking to my mom." "Then listen to that feeling. It's telling you something important." Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "The reporter said you wouldn't comment. Thank you for that." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. The next morning, I walked along the beach while the tide was low. The storm had left shells and seaweed scattered along the sand. Everything looked calm now, as if nothing violent had happened days before. But I knew better. So did the ocean. When I got back, Tessa was already standing the porch railing, humming softly to herself. "I'm thinking about applying to a trade program, woodworking. It's not college exactly, but it's something." "That sounds like a good start," I said. She smiled. "I think I'm finally choosing something for me." And that felt like progress for both of us. October slipped into November, and the air turned sharp and clean, the kind that made your lungs feel awake. The garden was finally settled for winter, bulbs tucked safely into the soil, mulch spread thick over the beds. Inside, the house felt whole again, not just repaired, but changed, like it had survived something and come out steadier. Tessa started staying later in the evenings. Sometimes she brought her sketchbook and sat at the kitchen table while I made dinner, drawing the harbor, the boats, the old warehouses along the shore. "You really see details," I told her one night. "I think that's why I liked engineering at first," she said, "but school made it all about numbers instead of shapes and space." "Design is about seeing how things fit," I said, "not just calculating if they can." She looked thoughtful. "My mom says art won't pay the bills." "Neither will misery," I replied. She laughed softly. "You should be a motivational speaker." "Absolutely not." One afternoon, Mr. Collins stopped by again, bringing a toolbox he said he didn't need anymore. "For your apprentice," he said, nodding at Tessa. Her eyes widened. "For real?" "For real." She spent the rest of the day organizing it like it was treasure. Later that evening, Lena called. I watched the phone buzz on the counter. Tessa looked at me carefully. "You don't have to answer." "I know." After a moment, I picked it up. Yes? There was hesitation on the other end. Hi, Mom. Hi, Lena. I I wanted to tell you I canceled the waterfront events. I realized I was trying too hard to look successful instead of actually building something solid. That sounds like a wise choice, I said. She exhaled slowly. I've been thinking about what you said, about not using you. I didn't realize how much I did that. I did, I replied, not unkindly. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. I hear that, I said. We ended the call gently, without arguments, without demands. Afterward, Tessa handed me a cup of tea. That sounded better. It was, I admitted, but better is just the beginning. A few days later, Tessa got an acceptance email for the trade program. She cried in my kitchen. So did I. I was so scared I was just running away from things, she said. Sometimes running is how you survive long enough to choose where to stand, I told her. That night, after she left, I sat on the porch alone watching the moon reflect off the water. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lena. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That one surprised me. I didn't reply yet, but I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not trust, but possibility. And for now, that was enough. The first real frost came early that year, turning the grass silver and stiff before sunrise. I wrapped myself in a thick sweater and walked down to the beach, letting the cold wake me fully. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about what I owed anyone, just what I wanted. When I got back, Tessa was already there, sanding a wooden bench she'd started building from scrap boards Mr. Collins had given her. I think I messed up the corner joints, she said. I crouched beside her. No, they're fine. A little uneven, maybe, but sturdy. That matters more. She smiled. I like that. Later, while we drank coffee on the porch, she said, Do you ever feel guilty for choosing yourself? All the time, I admitted. But guilt doesn't always mean you're wrong. Sometimes it just means you're changing. She nodded slowly. My mom says I'm selfish. People often say that when you stop living the way they expect you to. That afternoon, I finally texted Lena back. I'm glad you're trying. I need time, but I see the effort. Her reply came a few minutes later. Thank you for not giving up on me. I stared at that message for a long time. I hadn't given up, but I had stopped sacrificing myself, and there was a difference. A week later, Lena came by again. This time she called first. I just want to drop off something, she said. No agenda. When she arrived, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. For the repairs, she said. I know insurance covered most of it, but not everything, and it was my event. I hesitated. You don't have to. I want to, she said. Not because I owe you, but because it's right. I accepted it. That felt important, too. She noticed the bench Tessa was building. Is she working for you? She's learning, I said. Lena smiled politely, but I saw something else in her eyes. Respect. It was new. After she left, Tessa grinned. Your daughter's intense. She's learning, I said, echoing my words about Tessa. That evening, Mr. Collins invited us over for chowder. His granddaughter, Tessa, and I sat around his small kitchen table, laughing over stories of storms and near misses at sea. You look lighter, he said to me at one point. I feel lighter, I replied. Later, when I went to bed, I realized something surprising. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I wasn't waiting for the next demand. I was simply living. And it felt unfamiliar, but good. Winter settled in gently that year. No big storms, just quiet gray days and long evenings with the sound of waves brushing the shore. Tessa started her trade program in January. She still came by on weekends, bringing sketches of furniture designs and asking my opinion on wood types and joints I barely remembered but somehow still knew. "You should teach," she said once. "You're good at this." I laughed. "I already taught for 40 years. I think I've earned retirement." Maybe teaching just looks different now. That stayed with me. Lena called more often, sometimes just to tell me about a meeting that went well or a client she was nervous about. She didn't ask for anything, not once. That mattered. One afternoon, she visited with a small potted plant. "I thought it might survive better than flowers," she said awkwardly. We planted it together by the porch. "Thank you for not cutting me off," she said quietly. "I didn't cut you off. I just stopped letting you hurt me." She nodded, understanding more than before. But trust wasn't a switch you flipped. It grew slowly, like roots underground. Meanwhile, the house felt fuller, not louder, not crowded, just warmer. Copper claimed the sunny spots like he owned them. I started baking again, something I hadn't done in years. One night, Tessa asked, "Do you think you could ever forgive your daughter completely?" I think forgiveness isn't one moment. It's a process, and sometimes it comes after change, not before. She considered that. "I think I want that with my mom someday too, just not yet." "That's okay," I told her. "Timing matters." A few weeks later, Lena invited me to coffee near her office. I almost said no out of habit, but I went. She looked nervous, stirring her cup too much. "I wanted to ask you something, not because I expect it, just to see if you might want to." I waited. "My company is hosting a small seminar next month. No party, no showy stuff, just a few clients and speakers. I thought maybe you'd like to come, not as help, just as my mom." The way she said it, careful, hopeful, made my chest tighten. "I'll think about it," I said. She smiled, clearly relieved I hadn't said no. When I got home, Tessa was measuring wood for a small table. "She invited me to an event," I told her. "And?" "I don't know yet." Tessa smiled gently. "You don't have to decide everything all at once anymore." She was right, and that felt like freedom. The day of Lena's seminar arrived with clear skies and a soft breeze, nothing like the storm that had changed everything months before. I stood in front of my closet longer than necessary, debating between a blue sweater and a great one, then laughed at myself and chose the blue. Tessa noticed my nerves immediately. "You're going," she said, smiling. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." When I arrived at the small conference room, the atmosphere was nothing like the party had been. No decorations, no loud music, just rows of chairs, a modest table with coffee, and people talking quietly. Lena spotted me near the door and froze for a second, like she wasn't sure if I was real. Then she smiled. Not the polished business smile, but the one she used to have when she was little and saw me in the crowd at school events. "Mom," she said, walking over, "you came." I did. She didn't hug me, didn't cling, just stood there, clearly proud and grateful. I took a seat in the back. She spoke well, calm, confident, but not flashy. She talked about sustainable growth, about building partnerships instead of chasing attention. I knew without her saying it that she was talking about more than business. Afterward, she came to sit beside me. "Thank you," she said. "You did well," I replied. "You didn't try to impress, you just explained what you're building." "That's because I finally know what I'm building," she said softly. Outside, we walked together toward the parking lot. "I'm not asking to move back into your life the way it was," she said. "I know I can't." "I wouldn't want that either," I said. "But we can build something new." She smiled, eyes glossy but steady. "I'd like that." That evening, back at home, Tessa waited for the verdict. "Well?" she asked. She did good, and I did, I said, and I think so did I. A few days later, Tessa brought over a small table she'd finished at school. For you, she said nervously. It wasn't perfect. One leg was slightly shorter than the others, but it was solid, carefully sanded, lovingly made. I ran my hand over the smooth surface. It's beautiful, she beamed. Lena started stopping by occasionally, not often, not intrusively, just enough to show she was present. No more demands, no more power struggles, just effort. And I found myself enjoying my days again, gardening, walking by the water, helping Tessa plan projects. I wasn't living for anyone else's approval anymore. I was living because I wanted to, and that changed everything. Spring came quietly, almost shy after the long winter. New green shoots pushed through the soil, and the harbor smelled fresher, lighter. One afternoon, while I was trimming the hedges, Lena pulled into the driveway. She stepped out holding a small cardboard box. "I found some of your things in my storage unit," she said, "from when I moved out years ago." Inside were old photographs, a scarf I thought I'd lost, and a few letters my mother had written to me long before Lena was born. "I didn't realize I still had these," I said. "I didn't either," she replied, "but I read some of the letters. I think, I think I finally understand you a little better." We sat on the porch steps looking through the pictures. There was one of Lena at 5 years old, missing 2 teeth, holding a kite too big for her hands. "I remember that day," she said. "You ran the whole length of the beach with me." "I was younger then," I laughed. She grew quiet. "I always thought you were just strong, like nothing hurt you." I looked at her carefully. Being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means you keep going anyway. She nodded slowly. "I wish I'd known that sooner." "So do I said. Later that week, Tessa invited me to her school workshop. She wanted to show me a chair she was building from scratch. The place smelled like fresh-cut wood and oil. Students worked at long benches, focused and serious. "This is where I feel like myself," she said. I watched her adjust the back slats, patient and precise. She looked confident, grounded. "You found your place," I said. "Thanks to you," she replied. "Thanks to you," I corrected. "You did the work." That night, I dreamed of the storm for the first time in months. But in the dream, I wasn't afraid. I was standing on high ground, watching the water rise and fall, knowing it would pass. When I woke up, I felt calm. Not guarded, not braced, just calm. A few days later, Lena invited me to dinner at her apartment. It was small but neat, with plants by the window and books stacked everywhere. "I'm not great at cooking," she warned. Neither was the food, but we laughed about it. At one point, she said, "I know we can't go back to how things were, but I like how they are now." "So do I replied. It felt like something heavy was finally loosening its grip, not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest, and that was better. By early summer, the house no longer felt like a place that had survived a disaster. It felt like a place that had grown. The garden was full again. Flowers leaned toward the sun, and the porch smelled faintly of fresh paint and sea air. Even the fence looked steadier, like it had decided to stay. Tessa finished her first semester at the trade program with high marks. She stopped by with celebratory pastries and big plans for the fall. "I want to start selling small pieces," she said. "Benches, stools, maybe shelves." "You should," I told her. "People like things that are made with care." She smiled. "You taught me that." Lena came by later that day, carrying iced tea and a stack of brochures. I might expand into community workshops, she said. Nothing flashy, just practical stuff. Budgeting, planning, small business basics. That sounds useful, I said. She nodded. I want to build something that actually helps people, not just looks good on social media. We sat together on the porch, the three of us, watching Copper chase insects in the grass like he was still a kitten. For a moment, it felt strangely complete. Not perfect, but balanced. Later, after they left, I walked down to the shoreline alone. The tide was low, the water calm and clear. The same harbor that had once surged into my home now barely brushed the rocks. I realized I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. Not because they couldn't hurt me, but because I knew I could rebuild. And more importantly, I knew I didn't have to rebuild alone. When I returned, I made tea and sat at the small table Tessa had built. It wobbled just slightly, but I liked that about it. It reminded me that nothing needed to be flawless to be strong. My phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "Thank you for giving me another chance." I replied, "Thank you for earning it." Then I turned the phone face down and listened to the quiet of my home. Not the lonely quiet of before, but the peaceful kind. The kind that means you're exactly where you're meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it.